Hey guys, it's Lane here with Hobbies Man once again, and today we're going to be doing the first review for The Fires of Heaven. I'm going to divide this into 4 again, like I did last time, and it should be 14 chapters per, where this first part of the story also contains the prologue. So, Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan. I actually started reading this via via audiobook, because I saw that the first couple chapters of the story were available on YouTube. There was a video, it's probably a pirated video, but I started reading that while I waited for this to come in. So I ordered this from Half Price Books when I was halfway through The Shadow Rising, and it took about a week, almost 2 weeks to get to me. So while that was happening, I was listening slowly through the audiobook, and then I switched over and finished reading it through here. So yeah, overall, really good stuff. I was really excited when I finished reading the 4th book. Now, that is contrary to what I said in the review, but what I mean is I was excited about the series. I was interested in learning more. However, I wasn't necessarily excited by the ending of the 4th book. And so I was like, okay, this isn't a good ending, but I'm still interested in the story. I still want to continue. So let me just start the next book already. And so that's what I did. And overall, really, really good stuff. At this point, I am about 20 chapters into the Lord of Chaos, book 6. So I have to read off my notes in order to kind of talk about stuff here. So yeah, because I at this point, I'm like not sure when in the story things happen. So using my notes is going to help me a lot in making sure that I don't mess up anything, right? So yeah, the general thoughts here were basically that I was very excited to begin the story, so I kept going, and I started with the audiobook. The audiobooks are really good, and actually I like them so much that when I got a free Audible credit, I actually used it to buy Lord of Chaos, which I mentioned before too. So overall, good stuff here, pretty enjoyable things, right? So the rundown here is that the prologue starts with shit going down at the tower. Basically, there's this kind of political situation where Elida is the Amerlin seat, but all of the other people around her don't really respect her for 2 reasons. One, they were the ones that made sure that she was able to get there. And also, I just think that Elida in general doesn't really garner a lot of respect because she is such a emotional person, at least emotional for Aes Sedai. And I don't know why, but I feel like that makes it so that they don't really take her as seriously as other, possible members of the Aes Sedai. So yeah, but it shows us this, and then it kind of goes around explaining things that are happening across the world when these women are telling Elida, when the sitters, I think is what they're called, are telling Elida about things that are happening around the world. So overall, good stuff there. I enjoyed how that worked. We also get to see Padan Fain meet with Elida, and I'm not sure why he's meeting with her. I can't remember the exact details there, but I also am unsure about Padan Fain's situation. He's kind of like evil, but separate, right? He's not part of the darkness. He doesn't work for the Dark One. And he doesn't work with a Black Aja either. He just kind of hates Rand and the boys, right? And that's why he's evil. At least that's why I understand. But I'm not exactly sure. I can't remember. But interesting meeting there, and kind of just helps us develop the kind of the situation, right? Where all of the evil forces are maybe not joining together, but are actually moving in similar directions, right? So there's going to be a problem later on. So yeah. And then we move on to Min and Swan and Leanne, who are at a hearing or a court case. Basically, they're standing in front of a jury of their peers, more or less, and this is because they were caught committing crimes. And so Gareth Bryn, who apparently used to be Morghase's lover before she fell in with Gabriel, is introduced here. And it turns out that he is the leader, or the what's it called, like the manager of this estate, the person that this estate belongs to, and so he is in charge of these lands. He is not necessarily the governor, but he's like the guy that owns these lands, right? And so he's called down, and somehow the girls end up giving him the strictest, harshest oaths of service in exchange for avoiding corporal punishment, and then they run. And so Swan Swan and Leanne are actually taking advantage of the fact that they no longer have to not lie, that they no longer have to be honest or tell the truth in order to kind of further their goals. And I think that's interesting, but it also kind of removes some of their value in my eyes, because the interesting thing about them is that they're manipulators, but they manipulate by only telling the truth. So that is like an added level of difficulty. And now if they can lie, they can seduce and stuff like that, especially Leanne, since she kind of takes to her heritage, I would say, and starts using her feminine wiles, as apparently Aradomani women do. They're kind of using different skill sets, and it makes it seem like it's less difficult than it was before, but also more difficult because of their emotional state, right? Because they are disconnected from the thing that gave them purpose, and so it's like a weird situation that happens here. But I like their situation here. I think it's interesting that they lie, but actually they don't lie. They say the truth. They just don't say when they're gonna, do their oaths, and so they kind of manage to convince themselves that they're doing the right thing like that, and then they leave, and they run away. So yeah, then we go back to Camelin, to Andor, and Altima shows up. She is a woman from Tyr, one of the people that wanted to kill Rand, if I remember correctly, and she shows up to find a place to hide, and learns a lot of Morghase's problems by accident. So basically, Morghase is supposed to be this very thought out woman, very well liked woman, but also someone that doesn't take shit from men. And Altima sees her basically being controlled by Gabriel, and so this is pretty fucked up, right? Because obviously there's something wrong here, and Altima kind of uses that to her advantage, and also falls under the thrall of Gabriel as well, who we later learn is Ravine. So that's kind of interesting, right? So yeah, moving back to Rudian, Rand watches Moraine lead people to load these carts so that they can take all of these Angreal from Rudian down to the tower. And so Rand meets with the chiefs, and basically the Shido are bad, and they're going to be doing some shitty things, and they've actually managed to start moving towards Karian at this point, I think, although Rand doesn't exactly know that yet. And there's issues with the seals. Basically, the Quandiar seals that they have, I think there's supposed to be 7 of them, and 3 of them are in their possession, and they're breaking, which is not something that should be happening at all. So there's a problem there. Asmodean then tells Rand about the difference between men and women channeling, and we get to learn about the submission and dominance of the power and how that makes the people that access it quite different, right? So men have to take, and they actually aren't dominating the power, but they're engaging in a struggle with the power, whereas women are allowing the power to flow through them. And so it's kind of interesting. The BDSM terminology is maybe not necessary. It could have been done differently, but also, if Robert Jordan wanted to have, kind of like fetish vibes to his stuff, then that's fine. I don't really dislike it. I don't like it too much either. I don't really find myself feeling one way or the other, but I think that the terminology could have been less like that. It could have been just more like a push or a pull, or kind of talked about like a river, where a man has to be like a salmon, and a woman has to be like something else. I don't know. They could have been like a different way of explaining that to people. So it's not that important, but it's pretty interesting to see Asmodean talk about it with Rand, and also the fact that it seems like men can feel when women channel to an extent. Rand can feel like the pressure of the room change, whereas it doesn't seem like women can feel when he channels. So I'm not exactly sure how that works. Maybe I've missed something, but I think that is kind of how it kind of happens here. So then Matt finds himself courting this Aiel woman. I think her name is Melinda or Melindra or something. And it works out pretty well. I like this small kind of little relationship that Matt gets himself with. And it works out pretty well. So yeah, Rand lives with the maidens. He is the only man under their roof. And this is because of Abienda's relationship with him, but also because, if I remember correctly, it turns out that Rand is the son of a maiden that managed to have a child. And the way that the maidens work is that when one of them has a child and they want to stay a maiden, their child is basically put up to adoption and they don't know who it is. And so Rand is basically the first child that has come back to them. And so they develop this kind of familial relationship with Rand that is very powerful. And so that's why they're the way they are. And so that's why Rand gets all these special privileges. And it's never directly explained. Basically, it just starts being referenced later on. And this is something that happens too with the boys, where suddenly they're smoking their tobacco, which they didn't do before. And it's something that has always been referenced for adults. And then suddenly the boys start doing this too. So I think that's interesting. It's kind of a nice, subtle way of showing they are grown men now. So I like that. I think it's interesting. I really enjoy how Robert Jordan kind of takes the time to give you very clear, defined, like, this is what's happening. And then other things he just kind of leaves for you to interpret based on how he feels like writing it. So I enjoy his variety there in that sense. It makes his kind of like pedantic nature a little bit more interesting, right? So, yeah. So Avienda's relationship develops with Rand, and then she manages to switch Isandre. So Isandre is this random woman that is part of the peddlers that they met last book, and she is trying to get with Rand constantly because she's a dark friend, and I think she was sent to spy on him. But all of the women stop her as much as they can, especially Avienda has like this like hate for any female that gets close to Rand. So it's pretty interesting, but it's not really meaningful. It's kind of more or less just like extra set dressing. That plays in very importantly into the last part of the story. So, it might seem kind of ridiculous, but it actually ties in later, and it's pretty interesting how it does. So, yeah. Then the Wise Ones are bathing with Avienda and Egwene, and it's pretty interesting how they have these steam baths. So they have these like onsen type situations where they kind of create a tent, they seal it, and then they steam up a bunch of water. And that's how they shower. But as far as I'm thinking about it, that doesn't feel like a very useful way of spending water. I'm not really sure how it is that they manage to justify that in their culture, because isn't turning water into steam an easier way of wasting water than just showering? I'm not really sure. Maybe their bathing tents are lined with some sort of material that absorbs the water, and so they can just wring it out into a bucket again later and reuse it. I'm not really sure, but I think it might be also something like, because we're not able to use water as often, this is kind of like a luxury. And so even though it is kind of wasteful, it's also intrinsically part of our culture because of this luxury that it affords us. So I'm not really sure. It's kind of interesting. It's one of the things about Aiel culture that didn't really make sense to me too much, but it works out. It's kind of fun. It's interesting and cool. And then some of the Aiel leave because of the bleakness. And then we have this conversation where the Aiel kind of explain their kind of polyamorous tendencies towards how their relationships work. And I can't remember who they explain it to. I think they explain it to, like, Avienda's explaining it to Egwene, but I can't remember exactly how it goes. Then we get to see that the camp, or actually the city of Iridan, is attacked by darkhounds. And so basically they're like Cerberuses, or like hellhounds, I guess. And they leave impressions in a stone, but they don't actually have corporal like value to them, except for specific circumstances. And Rand uses balefire on one of them and actually saves Matt's life. So this way we get introduced to balefire and what it does. Basically, it erases time for the thing that it hits. So this plays into the story later, but it's a really meaningful power. It's also a very dangerous power. So that's really cool. I enjoy that quite a bit. And then we get to see that Matt also has a talisman that he got from his experience with the Finns, with the Elfins and the Aelfins and the Elfins. And this talisman allows him to not be touched by Aes Sedai power, but it doesn't stop him from being affected by male channeling. So that's pretty cool. I'm guessing it's something that men used to wear as an added protection, but there only seems to be one of them, and it belongs to Matt. So I'm not really sure if it's like a specific thing made by an elfin for Matt, or if it's something that used to be part of the world that no longer is, and Matt just happens to be the only one that has one. So pretty interesting question there. And then Lanfear shows up again, Ravine and Morghese. We finally get to see him interacting with her properly, and honestly, it's pretty fucked up because even though nothing is explicitly said, we can pretty much infer that her free will has been stripped from her, and more likely than not, she's basically been raped. I mean, maybe she has the veil of like having enjoyed it at the time, but ultimately it is, kind of sexual assault on this character. And of course, it makes sense that, this evil character would do that, but I think it was very well played on Robert Jordan's part to make it implied without having to show it. I thought it was good, but because of the way that Morghese acts most of the time towards him, I'm not sure that everyone that reads it will read it that way. And so it's kind of interesting how the situation might be interpreted differently. But yeah, it's pretty fucked up. But good writing there. So yeah. And then Rand finally mobilizes. They move after the Shido, and Moiraine actually swears herself to Rand into his service, using her oaths. And then this kind of marks a shift for their relationship, where Rand finally manages to relax around Moiraine and finally starts to care about her properly as a friend and confidant and teacher. And then this plays into later parts of the book very well. So overall, really good stuff here. I really enjoyed this part of the story, but I feel like it could have been easier if Moiraine did this earlier, or maybe there could have been a different way of Moiraine getting this, achievement, or this kind of new relationship with Rand quicker, if maybe they weren't so stubborn about the way that they go about things. So I don't know. Then we move on to Nynaeve, who is using a storm to escape out of Tanchico to Amadicia, and they get into the city / town, and Nynaeve finds a yellow eyes and ears woman, and they get into her place, and they start talking to her, and actually it's a trap. And it's not a trap because Nynaeve did it wrong, but it's actually a trap because Elida has sent out missives to all of the eyes and ears that if anyone finds Lane, she has to be sent back to the tower promptly, even against her will. And so they get attacked for this reason, and it's actually pretty messed up. And I think this is when Nynaeve starts to change, because yes, she beat Mogadine, and she's kind of riding a high about that, but this first situation of helplessness that Nynaeve feels here starts to change her, especially through the situation that happened later in the book. So it's kind of an important turning point for Nynaeve that if you're reading this for the first time, you should really pay attention to, because the journey that Nynaeve goes through in this book and into the next one is really important to her character, and I really like... well, I don't really like how it happens, but I think that it's really meaningful that she grows, even though I really like her as she is. So, yeah, overall, good stuff there. And eventually Julian and Tom managed to come back and help them, but they were cutting it close there. And then Min and the girls arrive at Lugard. They get information. They move to Sally Dare, or they get the name Sally Dare, and then from there, Swan knows where to go. They have to go to Sally Dar, which is a place where a blue Aja member that was very important to the history of the Aes Sedai was from, and so they know they have to go there, and apparently that's where all of the other Aes Sedai are, all of the ones that are in exile or maybe in rebellion against the tower. So good stuff there. And Gareth Bryn is at their heels, so he's kind of quickly following them, and he's actually being followed by a bunch of men, most of them old, but all of them still able warriors, and I like that. I think it's good because we slowly get to be building an army that is going to be pretty meaningful later on. So I like that. And Nynaeve and Elaine finally managed to pass Amador, and they find elephants in a circus. And the elephants are actually called Shreedit, and they're actually Shanchan animals. And they meet this guy called Luca, and they offend him, and then they actually end up needing his help later on. But what happens is that Nynaeve goes to sleep, and she finally meets Brigitte face to face, and they get an info dump. Or actually, she meets Brigitte earlier, but this is the first time that we get to see them working together, I think. They get a bit of an info dump, and then Egwene shows up later to get more information, and I think something happens here where they actually kind of get another slight change in their relationship here between Egwene and Nynaeve. So overall, this part of the story was really, really great. I enjoyed it a lot. I had a lot of fun with the book, and probably my favorite part of the story so far has been the stuff with Rand, mostly because that's where the action is happening at this part of the book. But even though it was enjoyable, it was not like super exciting. So yeah, it was kind of a slow start, but it gets way better, once you start getting into it. So overall, good stuff here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you thought, and thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.